Sarah was building sandcastles in the sandbox. She was very interested in this activity. The girl didn't even notice how much she stained her face and her dress. "Sarah, come here. I want you to meet our new neighbors," said the girl's mother. "Meet our neighbor, Mrs. Siniga, and her son, Brian. Turns out to be a boy your age. They recently came to our neighborhood from the northern outskirts. I really hope you will make friends with Brian." "What a handsome boy," Sarah remarked to herself. "Do you like playing with sand? Let me show you my castle. If you want, we can make little animals. Let's play together," suggested Sarah. "I'm not going to play with you. You're an adult. You're about to turn 5, and you're still playing with these toys. How many numbers have you learned already? Have you started learning the world map yet?" Brian asked. "You don't know anything, but you keep playing in the dirt. You're really still little. And by the way, you and I aren't the same age. I'm older than you by a whole 2 months." That day, Sarah realized that Brian only had negative emotions towards her. She annoyed him with her infantilization and mediocrity. 10 years passed. Sarah stood up as a high school student. Every morning, she went to school with her neighbor, Brian. Sarah came to the stadium to watch Brian play. If you're talking about Brian right now, he's really quite handsome. He's still a freshman, but he's already become an outstanding student in the class. The girls in the bleachers shouted enthusiastically. "It's 25 again. Same song again. High school just started, and he's already mega popular." Sighing heavily, Sarah thought to herself, Brian had always been different from the other kids. Almost since he was a little boy, he had always been popular. Sometimes it seemed like he could be outstanding at anything he wanted to be outstanding at. He always did everything at the highest level. "What are you doing, flying around in the clouds again?" Brian took the water bottle from the girl's hands. "Did you remember we have math next period? Come on, get a move on and I'll go change. Thanks for the water, by the way." The new math teacher walked into the classroom and wrote his name on the board. His name was Adrian Shepard. "That's my name. I suggest you memorize it," the new teacher said in a loud voice. He looked rather threatening. "I don't like pranksters, so be obedient kids. I hope we'll be friends." Why is our new teacher even scarier than the last one? I was really hoping that if we got a new teacher, I could pull up all my grades. I already miss my last teacher, Old Man Thomas, complained Sarah at lunch. "That man looks a little repulsive. He has a rather odd outfit. You'll notice he has a classic shirt and pants, but he's wearing regular gym sneakers. I hope he'll be a good teacher." Glenn tried to reassure the girl. "That's easy for you to say. You have good grades. And I'm bad at math. If I don't pass the exam, I'll definitely be expelled from high school." Sarah continued to roar and complain. "If you want, I can help you get better at math," said the girl to Brian, sitting next to her. "You're really going to help me? Do you feel like I'm good for something? Then I won't worry about anything else. I know you're a very good teacher," exclaimed Sarah excitedly. Glenn, Sarah, and Brian had been friends since elementary school. The boys supported each other and hardly ever fought. When Brian was little, he often saw his mother crying. She couldn't accept the death of her husband, Brian's father. "I've told you for the umpteenth time, find yourself a new husband. Your spouse died a long time ago. Brian is still young. You can't have him growing up without a father. And no matter how you look at it, there has to be a man in the house." Brian's grandmother, Marilyn, insisted. "Remember your ex-boyfriend, Jeremy? He seemed like a nice guy. He recently became an official, and I talked to him. He's okay with you having a son. He's got a good character. He's kind and malleable. He'll make a good father to Brian." "I beg you to stop talking about it. I told you I'm never getting married again." In a lifeless voice, Bridget replied. "Well, why are you so stubborn? It's been years since he died. How long can you pine for him? If you won't think of yourself, at least think of your son." Marilyn was indignant. "And do you think about me? Why are you always so concerned with the views of others?" resented Bridget. "Why do you talk to your mother like that? We are doing all this just for you," said Mr. Sinaga, Brian's grandfather. "I don't want you to worry about my son anymore. I will take care of him myself and do everything I can to make him happy," Bridget promised. "Mom, I don't need a daddy. I have enough of you. I promise you that I will become the strongest person in the world. In the future, I will protect you. So please, just don't cry." Brian hugged his mother tightly. He could hear his grandparents gushing over her. Brian turned out to be a very smart kid. He learned the junior high school program quickly. How did you raise him so well? Can you share your experience at the next parent-teacher conference? The teacher asked Brian's mother. "But it's not like I taught him any special method. He always liked to stay home and read books by himself," replied Bridget. "You say he likes solitude? By the way, I noticed that at school he also sits with a book in his hands and hardly socializes with anyone. Don't you think it's strange that he doesn't like to play with kids his age?" the teacher asked. "Sometimes I get the feeling that your child is repressing something in him. Maybe you should watch him." Sarah also noticed that her neighbor Brian hardly interacted with anyone. He often sat in the corner with a book in his hands. The girl suggested to her buddy Glenn that she invite Brian into their company. "Last time we called him, he seemed very cold. And to be honest, I'm scared of him in general," Glenn admitted. "And what's so good about him that you want to play with him? Isn't it enough for you that we play with you? Even if we approach him and invite him to join us, he still won't play with us," grumbled Taylor. Bridget was worried about her son, so she started inviting Sarah, the neighbor girl, into the house. After a while, Sarah and Brian became friends after all. Sarah climbed through the window into her neighbor Brian's room. It wasn't the first time she had done that. The sound of water was heard from the bathroom. The girl realized the roommate was taking a shower. Knowing Brian, this is going to be a long time coming. He's really slow, so he's not showering fast either, Sarah thought to herself. The girl decided to lie down on her neighbor's bed and sleep a little while waiting for him. "Came in through the window again," grumbled Brian, noticing the guest. "How many times have I told her to come in through the front door and she won't listen to me? Still, climbing into a room through the window is a little dangerous." Brian closed the window tightly. Sarah jumped up fearfully on the bed. Looking around, she realized she was in Brian's room. "You're awake after all, and I thought you were going to sleep in until tomorrow morning," Brian said in a disgruntled tone. "And why are you so cranky today? What's wrong already?" Sarah became indignant. Having argued a little, Brian and Sarah all got down to their homework already. "Why are you looking at me again like I have the answer to this assignment written on my forehead?" Brian asked the girl. "I just don't like you sitting so close. I told you to stay away from me," reminded Sarah. "And how do you suggest I explain examples to you? How am I going to see that you're making mistakes or not understanding something? Do you really want to be scolded by your teacher tomorrow?" Brian asked the girl. "Of course I don't want to be scolded by the teacher, but I can't stay here anymore either. If he keeps sitting this close, my heart will jump out of my chest," thought Sarah. The girl had noticed that she was reacting to her friend in some special way lately. "That's it. We're done here. Thanks for helping me with the examples. I instantly understood everything. I'm off. I'll see you tomorrow," said Sarah, and skipped out of the room. Damn, maybe I'm sick. Why have I been thinking about my roommate so much lately? Why is it that when I'm around him I start to worry? It's never happened before. Frightenedly thought the girl, clutching her pillow tightly to her. I wonder what that cat is doing there. Is it studying the wall? Brian gave it to me, by the way. There I go, thinking about him again. How many times can I do this? It shouldn't be like this. It's not right. He and I are just friends. We spent a lot of time together. I even remember the time we slept in the same bed together. I practically moved into his house. So, what went wrong now? So, these are the points you need to pay attention to in these examples. I hope everyone understands. Now, I'm going to pick one person and they're going to show us an example of this. Sarah, show us what you have understood, the math teacher said loudly. Sarah twitched fearfully. She absolutely did not expect to have to go to the blackboard right now. And what were you thinking? You know you can't be distracted in math class. The new teacher doesn't like not being listened to, said Glenn to the girl. The girl only sighed heavily. She didn't bother to tell her friend what she thought about last night. Hey, are you still here? Why aren't you talking? Glenn slapped his friend on the forehead. Did you get upset because you two had a fight? Glenn gently touched the girl's nose. Let's go play, said Brian and squeezed his buddy's shoulder tightly. Sarah, come with us, shouted Glenn to the girl. Sitting in the stadium, Sarah tried not to look in Glenn's direction. Every time she saw him, her face turned crimson red. Watch out! Brian shouted unexpectedly. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the ball fly towards Sarah. Brian ran towards the girl and intercepted the ball. And when did his back get so wide? Sarah thought in surprise. Unable to keep his balance, Brian fell right on top of the girl. I caught the ball. Oh, are you okay? Asked Brian to Sarah. I'm fine. Don't worry about me, replied the girl. You saw how mad Brian got about that ball. They almost got into a fight. By the way, who's the girl that Brian warded off the sword? I heard rumors that she was his childhood friend. How lucky for her. I wish I was saved from the ball, too. The classmates gossiped amongst themselves. Linda, why are you keeping quiet and not saying anything? Asked the girls to their friend. You two are having such a lively conversation that I absolutely don't want to interrupt you. You don't have to worry about me. I'm fine standing in silence, Linda exclaimed. She had liked Brian for months now, but she tried not to show it. And why do I feel like Linda has more meat than we do? It's probably because our cook thinks she's pretty, so he put more in. The girls in the dining room were indignant. If you want, I can share with you, said Linda. The girls immediately grabbed their wands and took the food from Linda's tray. Back in the classroom, Linda noticed again that her friends were barely socializing with her. There was no room for her in this company. Hey, look at that! There's that girl with them again. They carry her around with them all the time. The girls resented. Sarah noticed Linda walking alone. The girl was upset about something. Sarah had noticed Linda a long time ago, as she had noticed her attractiveness. Linda was very cute. Do you think Brian likes Sarah? Even though they claim to be friends, somehow I don't think she does. He's always hanging around her, Emma pointed out. And why do you care? Can't childhood friends like each other? Just admit that you like Brian. Is that so hard to say? Olivia said in a nonchalant tone. That's not what I meant at all. Don't you think Sarah is kind of sly? She's very good in other subjects, but for some reason she botched the math test. Have you noticed that Brian is really good at math? Emma asked. I guess she did it on purpose so Brian would help her study. Even though she's sneaky, I think he still doesn't like her, and I'm sure he has no feelings for her. Why don't you go up to him and ask him directly? Helga asked. By the way, Linda, why don't you go? You were so confident last time. You even brought him a bottle of water. Yes, Linda, don't you want to know the truth? Aren't you curious about who Brian likes? Emma asked. Linda had been standing outside the school for several minutes waiting for Brian. Finally, he came out of the main entrance. Linda called out to him, but Brian didn't turn around. It seemed that he simply didn't hear her. Walking out of the school, Sarah saw Linda. The girl was standing alone again. Hi, hasn't anyone ever told you that you're really cute? Asked Sarah to the girl. Thanks for the compliment, said Linda and smiled sweetly. Sarah noted to herself that the smile made the girl even more adorable. I know you are a friend of Brian's. I have a question for you. Do you happen to know who he likes right now? Gathering all her courage in her fist, Linda blurted out. I heard that you've been friends since you were kids and know each other very well, so I assumed you knew more than anyone else. Yes, Brian is a handsome guy, but can he really like anyone? Can he really fall in love with any girl? He walks around with a scowl on his face all the time. Good thing people don't scare him yet. Sarah thought to herself. As far as I know, Brian doesn't date anyone. He probably doesn't like anyone at the moment. After thinking for a bit, Sarah said. No one at all? Linda wondered. I'm sorry to have disturbed you. Thank you so much for answering my questions. Linda bowed to Sarah. The latter noted that Linda was not only nice, but also very polite. In appearance, Linda resembled a large, living doll. Why is it that all of a sudden she decided to ask me who Brian likes? Although, wait a minute. Did she really like Brian? Sarah guessed. Sarah bought a waffle and began to eat it with gusto. Suddenly, someone's hand snatched the pastry out of her hands. "Why are you hiding out here and eating alone?" Brian asked the girl. "Quickly, give me back my patty!" screamed the girl. Sarah wanted to take the watrutka, but Brian raised his arms high. The girl couldn't reach it. Suddenly, the girl got tangled in her own legs and fell to the ground. "You are the ultimate idiot! Why are you acting like a little kid? Why take my food away from me?" Resented the girl while Brian treated her wounds. Falling to the ground, the girl shattered her elbow. "Come on, don't worry so much. You'll recover soon. You're second to none at that. I want to ask you, why don't you want to have lunch with us?" Brian inquired, but the girl didn't answer him anything. "And did you notice that in addition to your elbow, your knee is also torn? If at all possible, you shouldn't walk on your own or you'll limp. Why don't you say anything? You're being very rude right now." "Look, put me in my place already. I can really walk by myself. I don't need your help," shouted Sarah, but Brian wasn't listening to her. "You're embarrassing me. Let me go. People are going to be looking at us. They'll say all sorts of stupid things later. Do we need it?" Emma decided to approach Brian on her own and ask him who he liked. "Why are you asking me that? But if you're interested, I already have a partner in mind for future marriage," replied Brian to the girl. "That's exactly what he told you? Didn't Linda say he didn't like anyone? Maybe she didn't ask at all and tricked us?" The girls were indignant. Linda had to admit that she hadn't had a chance to ask Brian personally, so she had asked his friend. Sarah dreamed of becoming a writer in the future. Therefore, she wrote short stories in her spare time. "Listen, that's not bad writing. It's a story about wrestling, right?" asked Glenn, peeking at the girl's notes over her shoulder. "Why are you and Brian always sneaking up on other people and peeking at what they're doing?" grumbled Sarah irritably. "Other people? We only sneak peeks at you," Glenn admitted to the girl. "Look, if you like writing so much, you could write a story about me and Brian. I think it would turn out pretty good." "Not only is that girl hanging around Brian, but she's actively flirting with Glenn," Helga remarked. The math teacher asked the students to pass their completed homework to the first desk. Sarah reached into her backpack, but couldn't find the correct worksheet. She had probably forgotten her homework at home. "That's it, I'm done. Brian's going to be all over me about this homework. He won't believe I forgot it at home. He'll probably think I just didn't do my homework." Frightened, the girl thought. "I noticed you're the only one who didn't hand in their homework," said Brian, walking up to the girl. "What happens to me if I say I can't find it?" asked Sarah. Walking up to the teacher, Brian said that all the students had turned in their homework. Sarah was surprised that Brian lied. He usually didn't. "It's time to start our lessons, so I'll ask for quiet." The math teacher tapped his palm on the table, urging the children to be more attentive. "He usually checks homework on the second day, so give me your assignment tomorrow," whispered Brian in the girl's ear. "But we have her homework sheets in hand, don't we? Why did Brian say everyone turned in their homework? We stole the worksheets on purpose to get her in trouble." Helga was indignant. "I suggest we go to the teacher right now and tell him that Sarah tricked him. She didn't turn in her homework. I'm sure he'll be very angry," said Emma. The girls had no idea that their whole conversation was being heard by Linda. Also, the girls' conversation happened to be overheard by Glenn. Glenn walked up to Emma and snatched the homework sheets from her hands. Stealing other people's notes is not something good kids should be doing. I'm taking these sheets with me, and you keep doing what you were doing before, and God forbid it happens again. "Are you looking for your homework by any chance? I found these notes in the hallway." Glenn handed the girl her homework sheets. He didn't bother to tell the girl that her classmates had decided to set her up. The next day, the math teacher announced that a field trip was planned for a week from today. It would last for 7 days. When everyone arrived at their destination, the class would participate in social activities for team building. Sarah knew that although the field trip was called a social event, it would actually be a week-long party. Don't get excited ahead of time. After this field trip, each student will have to write a 5,000-word essay. This essay will describe what the student has learned and how his or her life has been transformed. Warn the math teacher. This year, your class will be supervised by the head of the Education Committee, Miss Valentine. Announced the teacher, and a stern woman with a bundle on her head entered the classroom. Mr. Shepherd, your tie is loose again. If it is in bad shape next time, I will personally correct it. Warn the math teacher, Miss Valentine. Students, please don't be afraid of me. I am a very kind and gentle teacher. If any student behaves inappropriately, I simply invite them to the office for a cup of tea. Over a cup of tea, we have a nice chat and solve the problems that have arisen. Already scary. Sarah's mind raced. Miss Valentine explained that the class would be divided into 5 groups of 8 students. Each group would have its own leader, who was responsible for overseeing the condition of their group. Afterward, she asked the head of the class to make the rosters. "And you noticed! You're in my group!" rejoiced Glenn. He was extremely pleased that he would be spending this weekend with his friend Brian. Also in the group were Sarah, Linda, Emma, Olivia, Liam, and the head of the class, Howard. When the group got to the dorm, the students were divided into 2 rooms. There were 4 boys sleeping in one room and 4 girls sleeping in the other. This is my first time sharing a bed with another girl. Before, I always slept alone, Sarah admitted. So, have you gotten your stuff sorted out yet? I'd like to remind you that the meeting is at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Before the meeting, I suggest you go get something to eat. I don't know about you, but I'm really hungry, Sarah admitted. Linda, have you seriously never had a burger before? Surprised Sarah. Our personal chef has never cooked anything like that, and the housekeeper won't let me eat it, replied Linda. You have your own personal chef in your house who cooks your meals to order? You also have a housekeeper? That's pretty cool. Sarah continued to marvel. I think it's crazy. How can a little girl from a rich family socialize with people like us? Grumbled Emma. Sarah looked at her in surprise, but said nothing. Linda, if you've never had a burger before, why don't we go and eat one now? If anyone wants one, let them join us, said Sarah. If you've never had a burger, I recommend you start with their specialty burger. I just love it. And of the drinks, you can have whatever your heart desires. Any drink is perfect with a burger, said Sarah to Linda. So slow. How many times do you have to pick one burger? While you're talking, I'm going to starve to death, said Emma in a disgruntled tone. Sorry, we'll be right back. We'll hurry up, replied Linda to the girl. Linda offered to pay the bill. Sarah was a little embarrassed that a stranger she didn't know wanted to buy her a treat. Geez, what a dirty hypocrisy. Just let her pay and that's it. Her family is very wealthy. This purchase won't hit the budget. Then again, I've already told you I'm very hungry and you're holding me up, grumbled Emma again. Sarah blocked Emma's path, preventing her from going through to the register. I think you've said enough. This is the first time I've ever seen such a person who would be so brazen as to spend another person's money, Sarah said in an angry voice. Her eyes were throwing lightning bolts. The girl was very annoyed. Her family is rich, and she herself has expressed a desire to pay. Why don't you just shut up? Emma asked. I don't care how rich she is. To earn that money, her parents put in huge amounts of time at work. Only uncultured people like you act so low. Pay first and eat later, replied Sarah. When Sarah was little, she caught Brian's mom sitting on the floor. The woman's back seized up and she couldn't get up. Sarah grabbed a Band-Aid from the medicine cabinet and stuck it on Bridget's back. Thank you. I feel alive again. I've been so busy at the store lately that I haven't had much time to rest. Unfortunately, the pain in my back is getting worse every day, complained Bridget to the girl. Aunt Bridget, is being an adult always so hard? Asked Sarah. I feel bad that you had to witness such a spectacle, but that's the job. As hard as it is for me, I still have to work. I do it all so Brian can attend school, told Bridget. Just don't ever tell that to Brian's grandmother. She's very shady, so she's bound to worry. Let's keep it a secret. Aunt Bridget, I promise I'll be sure to give you a massage next time, exclaimed Sarah. Sarah grabbed the tray of food and moved it as far away from Emma as possible. Emma pulled the tray towards her and accidentally knocked over its contents. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to," Sarah said fearfully. "Let's walk around town some more before we head back to the hostel," Glenn suggested. "Oh, look, isn't that our Sarah?" "And what happened here?" Glenn asked, surprised, as he entered the cafe. "You crashed into me on purpose. Why did you do that? What did you mean by that?" Emma asked in an annoyed voice. "Were you being naughty again? How could you run into someone? We just got to high school. We need to get along well with other classmates." Glenn put his hand on Sarah's head. Afterward, Glenn walked over to Emma and helped her up. He asked Sarah to apologize to the girl. Sarah stared at Glenn in silence. She really didn't feel like apologizing. She didn't feel guilty about the situation. "Did you hurt your forehead again?" "I can't understand. Do you dislike your own head so much, or is it ironclad?" "Maybe someone hit you on purpose," Brian asked the girl. "I apologize for her. She's a bit of a fool. I believe she didn't do it on purpose. And if no one had gotten to her, it wouldn't have happened. I believe Emma should apologize too." Brian put his cap on Sarah's head. "I suggest we resolve this in a civilized manner. Shake hands and make up." Glenn acted as the reconciler. In the evening, Linda came up to Glenn and detailed what had happened. "Can you believe it? Sarah ignored me all day long." "Will she never speak to me again?" Glenn asked his buddy. After the incident at the coffee shop, Sarah started ignoring him. The friend's behavior had hurt the girl. "If you want her to forgive you, then treat her to something tasty. You know she has a weakness for sweets," advised his friend Brian. "I'll never accept an apology from him because apologies are just words. Why was he so cruel to me today?" thought Sarah before going to bed. Suddenly, a message from Glenn arrived on Sarah's phone. He had dropped a picture of a large bag filled with sweets. "Linda, are you awake? Would you like to come up to the top of the mountain with me to look at the stars?" Sarah asked. Seeing the bag of sweets, Sarah immediately forgave Glenn. "That girl is so easy to talk to," Brian thought to himself as he looked at Sarah. Brian noticed crumbs in the corners of the girl's mouth and gently removed them. "What are you doing? Why are you touching my face?" outraged Sarah. Brian had to explain to the girl that her whole face was covered in food, so he had to wipe it off. "Don't surprise people like that. You were too engrossed in your food, so you ate like a pig." With a slight smile on his face, Brian said, "Huh? You three are so close. I often see you guys hanging out together, and I always envy you." Laughing loudly, Linda said. She was amused by her friend's cute banter. "Next time we can hang out together, the four of us," suggested Sarah. "Really? I'm really excited about that. Thank you so much," rejoiced Linda. "It's 10 o'clock, so we need to hurry to the dormitory. I think curfew will be starting soon," said Brian, looking at the time. When the friends approached the dormitory, they saw that the gate was locked. Standing by the gate were Howard and Liam. "This is all your fault. And after all, you were the one who wanted to go out and see some outlandish beast at this late hour. Don't you have anything else to do?" Liam asked his buddy Howard. "I wasn't lying. I really saw a white animal out the window. It looked a lot like a ghost," replied Howard. Suddenly, a rustling sound was heard in the bushes. The boys shouted fearfully. A small dog of white color came out of the bushes. "Oh, look how cute he is! He looks adorable!" exclaimed Sarah, taking the dog in her arms. "Stephen, hi, can you help? Since we can't go back to the hostel tonight, we want to spend the night in the park. Help us out with that," asked Linda to her butler. "My butler has set up a camp in the park. It should be enough to meet everyone's needs," Linda announced in a loud voice. "Butler?" Glenn marveled. "Broke the tent?" Reluctantly, Sarah interjected. "Miss, everything is ready. I wish you a pleasant night. You can call me whenever you need me," said Stephen and bowed low to the girl. As they entered the park, Sarah was surprised at the scale of the tent city. Not only were there tents to sleep in, but there was also a small bar with food and drinks. "I wasn't expecting this. Linda, your parents aren't oil men by any chance?" asked the girl Liam. Linda laughed merrily and offered to help herself to dessert. The butler walked over to Sarah and took a dry birch leaf from her hair. Ah, beautiful girl in the pink dress. I was just very concerned about the dead leaves tangled in your hair. I hope you won't blame me for not helping you do it in secret, said Stephen to the girl. Linda, your butler is so young and polite, exclaimed Sarah. That's wonderful, miss. Your hair is so pretty, and your eyes are shining, too, said Brian, touching the girl's hair with his lips. Hey, what are you doing now, and more importantly, why? Startled Sarah. You're an idiot! Are you really that easy to get upset? No matter who talks to you, you're always blushing. Indignant, Brian let go of the girl's hair. You fooled me again, asshole. You're not cute at all like other people say about you. In an annoyed voice, Sarah exclaimed, Wouldn't you like to play a game of some sort? The butler brought me a new one recently. I've never played it before, Linda said in a loud voice. The girl decided to smooth over the awkward situation. Liam was the first to pull the card. The assignment says I have to ask the person on the right any question, and if he refuses to answer, you will do 30 push-ups. Read Liam. Now, I'm the one who's supposed to ask some tricky question to make it more interesting, right? Preferably push some weaknesses. Let me think for a moment. What should I ask you? Liam said thoughtfully, looking at Linda. Linda, you are a very pretty girl. You always have good grades. Your family is rich and you have a good figure. Is there anyone you like? Now, you give me time to think about it. Yes, there is. After thinking for a bit, Linda replied. And who is it? Come on, tell us, demanded Liam. I won't tell you anything as it's a big secret. Then again, the assignment said you only had to ask one question. You're asking a second one now, replied the girl. The second card was drawn by Howard. He should have told his friends some secret. The other day in the locker room, I ran into our math teacher, Adrian Shepard. He decided to change his shirt. Turns out he has a huge scar on his back. It looks like someone tried to cut him in half. And have you heard the rumors that our math teacher some time ago was in some kind of gang and fought all the time? Asked Sarah. The attendees were frightened into silence. They had no idea that their teacher was keeping such terrible secrets. It was Brian's turn to pull a card. He had to tell about his childhood or a friend's childhood, an embarrassing situation that embarrassed him in front of his friends. Brian looked at Sarah carefully. And what does that look? Does he really want to say something about me? And if he does, he's in trouble, Sarah thought to herself. When Sarah was about 7 years old, she learned how to do her makeup the way adults do it. She secretly took my mom's makeup and applied it to her face, thinking she looked pretty. Brian began to narrate. The girl wanted to clamp her buddy's mouth shut, but he pushed her away from him. Then, when we went to school, she greeted everyone who passed her. She did it with an extremely excited face. After that, the class teacher told her to go home as her classmates had endless laughter. By the way, that makeup didn't come off for a long time afterwards, so Sarah had to spend some time at home. I also remember the teacher's eyes widened that day, and she stared at her for a long time, said Glenn, and everyone laughed amicably. Brian, what a jerk you are after all! Why would you tell stories about me like that? Shrieked Sarah. She really wanted to strangle her friend. Sarah reached for the cards and picked one for herself. According to the terms of the assignment, she had to pick the person who would sing a song. Okay, now I'm going to get my revenge on you. You will be the one to sing the song. Sarah pointed her finger at Brian. Brian had always been the perfect combination of looks and intelligence. He was known as an outstanding and handsome guy, but there was another side to him that few people knew about. He absolutely couldn't sing and had a complete lack of hearing. All right, I'll do the assignment. I'll get through this. Sighing heavily, Brian thought. As soon as Brian sang, Glenn immediately grabbed the pillows and covered his buddy's mouth. It was just impossible to listen to something like that. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a savage pain in her stomach. Being able to participate in any activities was out of the question. I'll keep an eye on her and make sure she takes some medicine and you get some water, please, asked Brian of Linda. Brian walked over to Sarah's bed and adjusted her blanket. Afterward, Brian gave Sarah the medicine and a glass of water. He asked the girl to get some sleep. I see you are feeling better. I brought you some food. said Linda, looking into Sarah's room. "Linda, thank you for your help. I do feel a little better," replied the girl. "What's that you're doing? Are you writing some kind of story?" asked Linda, looking into Sarah's notes. "I'm writing random ideas. And again, I just want to point out that not only are you cute, but you're a really nice person. You're the most charming girl I've ever met," replied Sarah. Linda could see that Brian cared about his friend Sarah. There was a deep connection between him, Sarah, and Glenn. Linda was extremely curious about what this trio had been through, that they had developed such a deep friendship. Sarah turned to Linda and invited her to join their company. When Glenn was 7 years old, his father was promoted to principal of the school. The boy was extremely happy about the news. Glenn knew that his father had long dreamed of a promotion, so he was happy for him. "Although I'm happy about the promotion, the school I'll be working at is far away from here. You may have to transfer to another school," said his father to Glenn. Glenn had absolutely no worries about the move. He was sure that he would definitely be the most popular student at the new school. Passing the tests will be easy, learning new skills will be very easy, and I will win all the competitions without even blinking an eye. I will always look poised, confident, at ease. After a while, all the students in the school will be drawn to me. Moving to a new school, Glenn strove to win the love and respect of his classmates from day one. Because he was good-looking and had an outstanding mind, he quickly became the most popular kid in the class. Glenn quickly made friends with his classmates. The only one who wouldn't be friends with him was Brian. Glenn took notice of him from day one. Brian was a calm, confident person. He always got great results and was talented. Brian only had one unpleasant character trait. He was cold to the people around him. Brian rarely came to the aid of his classmates and didn't want to participate in any school activities. "What's his problem? All he has is good grades and looks. There's nothing special about him. What amazes me is the fact that he thinks he's too mature, so he doesn't want to play games with us." The classmates resented him. Glenn, on the other hand, was eager to be friends with Brian. All his pompousness and inscrutable adulthood seemed to him to be something special and incredibly cool. Brian seemed like a very interesting guy to Glenn, so he was constantly attracting his attention. Glenn really wanted Brian's attention. He was always walking beside him and telling him stupid things. Brian listened to him without saying a word. "You talk a lot. Instead of distracting me, you could go to the library and read some books," Brian once said to Glenn. But the boy didn't take offense at him. On the contrary, he wanted to be friends with Brian even more. Glenn even talked the teacher into putting them together at the same desk. "Listen, how about we play basketball with you? I even brought a ball with me today." Glenn hoped to turn Brian around with a game. This time, Glenn was right on target. It turned out Brian really liked moving games. After a few months, Brian and Glenn became good friends. One day, when Glenn and Brian were playing basketball, a cute girl with golden hair approached them. It was Sarah. "Why didn't you go home early today? I've been looking all over for you," the girl said excitedly. Glenn had never seen Brian talk to anyone like that before. It was obvious that this girl was important to him. After a while, Glenn and Brian were joined by Sarah. After that, they became an inseparable trio. "Glenn, thank you for playing basketball with Brian. He has never played with anyone else before. For that reason, his mom and I were very worried. We even thought Brian was getting into some kind of trouble at school," Sarah once admitted. Looking at Sarah, Glenn noted to himself that he liked this girl. She was extremely sweet and very kind. "I was at the store the other day and noticed this barrette. I thought it would go perfectly with your hair." An embarrassed Glenn handed the girl the barrette. Sarah was delighted with the gift. She was rarely spoiled with such little things. "Listen, where did that barrette come from in your hair? I've never noticed it before," said Brian as he approached. The girl confessed to him that it was a barrette that Glenn had given her. "Don't talk to me anymore," said Brian with a glare towards Glenn. He took Sarah's hand firmly in his. "But why?" Glenn wondered. Glenn remembered how sad and lonely he felt back then. Roughly speaking, He had been pushed away by Brian for no good reason. Glenn had absolutely no idea what had happened or why his friend was avoiding him. "Please tell me what's going on. Why did you stop playing with me?" Glenn asked Brian one day. He really wanted to discuss all the misunderstandings that had developed between them. "I just don't want to play with you anymore, so don't bother me," replied Brian. "Glenn, why do you keep following Brian around? You can see he doesn't want to play with you. Why do you keep doing that?" Glenn was asked by his buddies. "You can see he only wants to hang out with his girlfriend. As soon as classes are over, he finds her and they immediately go home." "Wait, that blonde is his girlfriend, not his sister?" Glenn wondered. The guy thought Sarah was related to Brian, so he gave her the hairpin. If Glenn had known she was his girlfriend, he never would have done it. "He doesn't have a sister. He's the only child in the family. Since he's been friends with Sarah for years, they do act like brother and sister sometimes," explained Glenn to his buddies. Suddenly, Glenn was in tears. He liked Brian and Sarah and really wanted to be friends with them. Glenn didn't know how to get Brian to like him and become his friend. For several days, Glenn avoided Brian. The boy was constantly thinking about how to explain to Brian that there had been a misunderstanding. In the fall, they decided to have a huge party to celebrate the school's anniversary. Sarah and Glenn had a joint performance that day. "It's been so long since I last saw you. Where have you been disappearing all this time? I know Brian was really rude, and I got mad at him for it. Don't fight anymore, okay?" Sarah asked. Suddenly, a large billboard came off the wall and flew at the children. Glenn's self-preservation instinct kicked in, and he ran away, leaving the girl behind him. Luckily, Brian ran up to the girl and shielded her from the blow. Glenn realized that day that the feelings he had for Sarah would never compare to what Brian felt. "Brian, it's my fault you got hurt." Through tears, Sarah said. "What are you talking about? Didn't you wrap all those bandages around me?" Brian asked, surprised. "Since you protected your heads, there are no serious injuries, just scrapes and abrasions. You're a very smart kid. You reacted quickly." The nurse praised the boy. "Is that boy outside a friend of yours?" "He's been sitting there for a long time," said the nurse. Looking out the door, Brian saw Glenn. "Don't cry. You better drink some milk. There are only scratches on my body and you're roaring like someone died." Brian handed Glenn a carton of milk. "Glenn, I'm glad you're okay. You see Brian got hurt because of me." A crying Sarah walked up to the guys. Hearing the girl's words, Glenn sobbed again. Brian scrambled between the two friends. He had absolutely no idea who to comfort first. After this incident, the friendship between Brian, Glenn, and Sarah was rekindled again. Walking out of school one day, Glenn noticed Sarah standing alone. It was raining outside, and the girl was without an umbrella. "Let me share my umbrella with you. I can walk part of the way with you," said Glenn to the girl and opened the umbrella over her. "I noticed Brian wasn't at school today. Did something happen to him?" asked the girl Glenn. "He got sick yesterday. He's lying in bed like a helpless puppy, can't even get up," said Sarah. After this incident, Glenn started taking an extra umbrella with him, in case Sarah didn't have an umbrella again. Sarah noticed Brian's jacket lying on the chair. He had given her his jacket a few days ago when it got drastically colder outside. "The temperature is supposed to drop tomorrow, and I have his jacket. I need to get it back soon," Sarah decided. The girl once again snuck into her friend's room through the open window. This time, she decided to bring her cat Cracker with her. Brian wasn't in the room. Sarah sat down on Brian's bed and clutched her jacket to herself. For some unknown reason, the girl was very nervous. "Lately, I can't calm down when I'm around him. At the moment, I can smell a familiar odor. The room smells like him," Sarah thought to herself. The girl pressed the jacket against her and inhaled its scent. "And why are you burying your face in my clothes like a drunk?" asked Brian, who had entered. "You wouldn't think anything of it. I was just checking to see if the jacket needed washing, then I'd do it for you. Or something like that," exclaimed Sarah. "Okay, leave the jacket on the chair," Brian said dryly. Back home, Sarah spent a long time blaming herself for her stupid behavior. "And you've noticed that Linda has gotten closer to Sarah. She has nerves of steel, after all. That Sarah is a bit of a strange girl," said Helga to Emma. Linda, come see me this winter break. My brother is coming over. I think he'll be glad I have a friend. But I want to warn you that he's pretty stubborn and likes to tease me. Sarah had wanted to invite Linda to visit for a long time, but had never found an excuse. It's great that you have a brother. I've always wanted a brother or sister, but unfortunately I'm the only child in the family, Linda admitted. As you all know, winter vacation starts tomorrow. In the meantime, I have an announcement for you, said the math teacher in a loud voice. Since he quickly got along with the children, he was promoted to the position of class teacher. Your classmate Sarah won first place in the last regional essay contest. Only 2 people in the entire region won the prize. Let's all give her a round of applause together, the teacher suggested, and the whole class clapped loudly. I wish you were half as good at math as you are at literature, grumbled the teacher, handing Sarah the winning certificate. Great job, Sarah, praised her friend Linda. Not bad, said Brian and patted his friend on the head. Of course you can be a math genius, but you don't have to be better than me at writing, exclaimed the girl. Yeah, I am. Brian agreed. Sarah noticed that since that jacket incident, her friend had become kinder towards her. He looked at her more affectionately and smiled more often. Why is he looking at me with such kind eyes? What has happened? I've never seen that expression on his face before. Frightened, Sarah thought. Walking out of the school, Sarah saw her brother Elliot. Screaming with joy, the girl rushed into his arms. Sarah, I've really missed you too. We haven't seen you in 2 whole years, replied Elliot to the girl. Brian, why don't you come over here too? Let me look at you, asked Elliot. Since Brian refused to come over to Elliot, he walked over to him himself and gave him a big hug. Sarah was glad that her brother was finally back. He had studied abroad for 2 years at the Faculty of Arts. However, the girl was worried that since her brother would be with her now, her relationship with Brian might deteriorate. Communicating with him would be much more difficult. Elliot, why are you back so early this year? The girl asked. My university organized an event nearby. That's why I came early. I was passing by the school, so I decided to stop by to pick you up. By the way, your new math teacher was a classmate of mine in high school. Narrated Elliot. I keep asking him to take care of you. Does he honor my request? Does he treat you special? Yeah, special, Sarah thought, remembering the angry look in her teacher's eyes. In honor of Elliot's arrival, it was decided to have a party. 2 families gathered, Brian's and Sarah's. Sarah put on the new dress Elliot had brought her and went out into the living room. So, what do you think of this dress? I had it specially picked out for my sister. Doesn't she look cute in it? Asked Elliot to the people present. Brian looked at the girl in silence. He felt his heart pounding frantically. And you, Brian, what do you think about it? Fascinated by her, am I right? Elliot asked. I wasn't looking at her, muttered Brian and lowered his eyes to the floor. Sarah knew that from a very young age, Brian hadn't been able to express his emotions. Even when his grandfather had died, he had been completely calm. Even though Brian was clearly broken by the tragedy, he hadn't shed a tear that day. Seriously, Elliot, we're not kids anymore, so we don't need to be chaperoned. Maybe we shouldn't do this after all, grumbled Sarah when Elliot decided to walk them to school on the first day after winter break. You'll always be a kid in your big brother's eyes. Besides, I came to school to see my old friend Adrian, replied Elliot to the girl. Noticing his old friend Elliot waved cheerfully at him. What are you doing here? Grumbled Adrian. Why did you suddenly decide to become a high school teacher? You could have accomplished more with your qualifications, said Elliot to his buddy. If you have enough time to take care of me, can you get your sister to solve her math problems and tell her to stop flirting with her friend? It's annoying me. Adrian answered him. Sarah, where's Brian? Why isn't he here? Asked Glenn. The teacher noticed he didn't look good, so he let him stay in class, replied Sarah. These past few days, something strange has happened. When I was a kid, I used to tease Sarah all the time and share my worries with her. She used to always get mad at me or upset. Thought to himself Brian, sitting in the classroom. I've had moments lately where I've felt like she might like me, Sometimes it seems so obvious, but at the same time extremely vague. Maybe she wants to be closer to me too. Brian, are you feeling better? Asked Sarah, peeking into the classroom. Brian, you didn't drink enough water today. That's why I brought you a water bottle. Take it. It's yours, said Sarah, and handed Brian the bottle. Brian decided to test his hunch, so he rose abruptly from his seat. Sarah, said Brian and covered the girl's hand with his own. Can you let go of my hand? Immediately, the girl cried out, but Brian squeezed her hand even tighter. Brian gently stroked the girl's face. Sarah looked fearfully into his eyes. This kind of behavior from Brian was unfamiliar to her. Angry Sarah pushed Brian's hand away from her. What's gotten into you? You're really weird today. Is it really a fever? Don't think anything more than that. I just decided to be nice to you. Sarah set the bottle on the desk and walked out of the classroom. Was I wrong? Brian thought to himself wistfully. Before we begin our lesson, I'd like to introduce you to your new classmate. He has just recently moved into our neighborhood. Meet Bruce, announced the teacher. A red-haired boy walked into the classroom and waved his hand in greeting. Before you sit back down, I want to make a few remarks to you. From this day forward, you will have to wear your school uniform. Also, you are not allowed to walk around wearing a headdress, said the math teacher to Bruce. Are you kidding me? I'm not going to wear that ugly uniform. And who told you that you can touch my hat? Bruce pushed the teacher's hand away from him. Oh, he's a bully! Frightened, Sarah thought. Leave me alone, everyone. I'm going to do whatever I want. And I'm going to sit at this exact desk. Bruce put his backpack on the desk where Linda was sitting. He didn't care at all that the seat was already taken. So, Linda, have you missed me yet? Bruce asked the girl. Now come with me to my office. The math teacher put his hand on Bruce's shoulder. Wait for me, I'll be right back, promised the girl Bruce. He's kind of weird, Brian thought to himself. Sarah thought wistfully about the fact that she would now have to study with this bully for the next 3 years. It was safe to assume that her quiet life had come to an end. After the incident in class when Brian had been acting strangely, Sarah had started to avoid him. She became uncomfortable being around him. Sarah, why didn't you wait for me and Glenn to have lunch together today? By the way, I've noticed you've been disappearing somewhere right after class lately. What are you up to already? Asked the girl as Brian approached. I've had a lot of things piling up lately, so I'm in a hurry to get home, lied the girl. Have you started avoiding me? Whispered Brian asked. Stop talking nonsense. I'm off. I have to go to the club. Sarah was determined to get away from Brian and as soon as possible. She's avoiding me after all, Brian guessed. Linda, answer, why is our new student acting like you two know each other? Sarah asked. Linda was about to answer, but suddenly she saw Bruce. The girl froze in place in a stupor. Linda, I transferred here specifically for you. Why are you so cold to me? Bruce walked over to the girl and hugged her tightly. Get away. First of all, don't think you can just touch me like before. Second, I'm not at all happy that you transferred here. The girl exclaimed and pushed Bruce away from her. Let's get out of here. Linda took Sarah's hand and led the way. Linda, answer me. Who is this guy? Who is he to you? Why does he act like he knows you well? Sarah asked. It's like you and Brian. Bruce and I used to be good friends. We've been friends since we were kids, but then things changed, replied Linda. Suddenly a teacher came up and shouted loudly that Sarah needed to come to the teacher's lounge. I'll be right back. I'll find you and then we can have a proper talk, said Sarah and went to the teacher's lounge. Looking into the teacher's room, Sarah saw Brian. Come at last? Teacher asked me to go with you to the storage room and get some stationery. He's out for some time, so he can't tell you in person, said Brian to the girl. Brian headed off to the warehouse. Sarah followed him silently. Wait a minute. Why did the teacher call for me specifically? It's not my turn to be on duty today. And why didn't he call any of the boys? The more Sarah thought about the situation, the more it seemed suspicious to her. As soon as Sarah entered the warehouse, Brian immediately cornered her. Answer me. Why did you start avoiding me? Why are you looking at me like that right now? Are you really going to hit me? Brian asked the girl. It's okay. You just misread the situation. Sarah held her hands up in the air, disarmed. Brian grabbed his head and took a couple steps back. He realized he was unlikely to get the truth out of the girl. Well, where's the stationery around here? Let's hurry up and get back to class, said Sarah, looking around. We don't need to look for it. The stationery won't be here until tomorrow, said Brian. Well, I'm off then. I don't have time for these childish games. I still have to talk to Linda today. Sarah ran to the door and tugged on the knob. The door didn't open. You're always around Linda. Do you really like her that much? Asked Brian, walking up to the girl. Looks like we're locked in here. Listen, do you happen to have any other topics of conversation? I don't really feel like discussing it at the moment, Sarah exclaimed and yanked the door open again. If you don't want to talk about Linda, then answer me. Why are you avoiding me? Whispered Brian in the girl's ear. You know it yourself. You've been acting really weird lately, and it's freaking me out, replied Sarah. Have you started to hate me? Asked Brian. Maybe. To be honest, I don't know that. It's just that when I'm around you, I feel weird, the girl answered him. I knew it, mumbled Brian. Brian pulled a key out of his pocket and unlocked the door. Okay, let's get out of here, said Brian and walked out of the warehouse. He's getting weirder every day. Sarah's mind raced through her head. For several years in a row, Linda had celebrated her birthday alone. Her parents were always busy doing something. They had no time for their own daughter. Dad, you're finally back. Can you imagine? And I am the best student in school. I have the best grades. One day, the girl bragged to her father. She really wanted him to pay attention to her and listen to her. So that's great. You've done a great job. Now, if you'll excuse me, I must leave you and go to work again. But don't worry, Stephen will keep you company, replied the girl's father. Linda, is something wrong with you? We haven't seen you throughout the day. We even had to walk home without you. Are you okay? Asked Sarah into the phone. It's my birthday today, said Linda in a sad voice. Linda, why didn't you ever talk about it before? Why didn't you tell me it was your birthday? I didn't even get you a present ready, exclaimed Sarah. It's fine. Don't worry about it. Even my parents don't care about it. They don't care about all my birthdays at all, mumbled Linda. What are you talking about? Of course I care. If I had known about your birthday earlier, I would have figured out a way to celebrate it with you. I suggest we have cake tomorrow after school. My mom makes the best cakes in the world, said Sarah to the girl. Now go to bed and don't think about any nonsense. You and I will definitely see you tomorrow and eat cake, Sarah assured the girl and hung up the phone. Linda heard a rustle behind her. Turning around, she saw Bruce. He was holding a box tied with a ribbon. The girl guessed that he had gotten into the room through the open window. Linda, happy birthday. And don't worry, I'll be leaving soon. I came here to give you your present. I never come in the front door, and I was afraid the butler wouldn't let me in, told Bruce and climbed up on the windowsill again. Brian began to notice that Sarah was becoming more and more distant from him. The girl was devoting all of her free time to Linda. All right, Brian, bye. I'll see you at school tomorrow, said Sarah as they reached the house. That's all you said to me as we walked here. I take it you don't need my help with math anymore. At least you have a friend now, the second best student in school. In an emotionless voice, Brian said, You better forget about what happened. I didn't mean anything by it. It was just a joke, said Brian and disappeared into the entryway. Did something happen? Linda asked. Sarah's mom had baked a delicious sponge cake. Sarah tried to put on a cheerful appearance, but she kept mentally going back to Brian, and it made her mood slump. Sarah, what happened? I can see something is bothering you. Is it because of Brian? Did you and him have a fight? Linda asked worriedly. You know, I didn't have any real friends before we met. The first time I saw how close you were with Brian and Glenn, I envied you. You may not realize it, but friendship is the most precious thing I have. Linda took Sarah's hands firmly in hers. You're my first best friend, and I'm very happy to have you. So I don't want you to be sad if you have a fight with a friend. If there are any misunderstandings or disagreements, you can always talk to Brian about it. especially since you've been friends since you were young. He's bound to understand what you want to tell him. Sometimes I even think you two are much more than just friends. At first, I, like everyone else, thought you were close friends or distant relatives, but over time I realized that you're in a relationship. Roughly speaking, you're dating without realizing it. You've got it all wrong. Me and Brian, we grew up together. We can't have feelings for each other, Sarah exclaimed. What makes you think you can't like someone you grew up with? Linda asked, surprised. Anyway, stop talking about me. Didn't you want to tell me about Bruce? Why not do it today? Asked Sarah. And there's not much to tell. We've been friends with him since we were kids. I still like him. When Linda was bored or lonely, she went into the garden. Here she could daydream, be quiet. Hey, Linda, why are you here alone again? Have you been crying again? My mom says all crybabies grow up to be creepy ugly, shouted Bruce. Since Bruce lived next door, he often climbed up to Linda's house to visit. He didn't see the tall fence as a barrier. I must have done something wrong. That's why my parents don't want to play with me. Sometimes I think they don't like me at all, complained Linda to her buddy. You're right. Adults are so annoying. They're always promising something and then they don't fulfill it. My parents lie to me a lot too, so forget it. There are plenty of people around to play with. You can even make friends, said Bruce. But I don't have any friends at the moment. I'm too shy, Linda admitted. Don't be silly. If you talk first, anyone will want to be friends with you. You're very nice. That's why people like you. Bruce encouraged the girl. You look really nice, too. And you don't look like you like to visit over the fence, said Linda and laughed merrily. But right now, I'm getting the feeling that you two aren't very close. What happened between you two? Asked Sarah after listening to Linda's story. As time went on, Sarah began to realize that she had more than just friendly feelings for her friend. She was very embarrassed when he came close to her or touched her. Bruce, are you going to go have fun with the girls after school? A classmate asked and patted Bruce on the shoulder. What are you talking about? If you have nothing better to do, you better go home and play video games, Bruce muttered in an annoyed voice. Fine, whatever. The classmates laughed loudly and walked off to class. Bruce, what's going on? What did those guys want from you? Linda asked her buddy. Nothing. Ignore it, said Bruce and turned away from the girl. Would you look at that? It's Linda. She looks like a nice, demure girl, yet she flirts with guys and isn't even embarrassed. There's a reason the girls in our class don't like her. The classmates whispered among themselves. Linda admitted that while she was in middle school, she felt isolated from society. Absolutely no one wanted to be friends with her. Yes, in her life sometimes appeared acquaintances, but they communicated with her only for profit. One day, Bruce came to class bruised and battered. It was immediately clear that he had been in a fight with someone. Classmates whispered that he had beaten up one of his friends. You've got to be kidding me! My daughter needs to find a more trustworthy friend. This Bruce is absolutely no good for her. Linda's mom was outraged. After that, the woman forbade her daughter from interacting with the neighbor boy. Well, why did you get into a fight? Look at you. You even started skipping classes. It's not like you, Linda exclaimed. She didn't want to break things off with her friend. This whole situation was upsetting her to the point of tears. Don't ask me anything about what happened. This story doesn't concern you. And don't worry, I will always protect you, Bruce promised the girl. And after saying that, he started protecting me. Can you imagine? Bruce even threatened the girls who spoke ill of me. And after that, they didn't even dare to talk to me, Linda admitted. And I didn't want him to worry so much about me and forget about me. I thought that if I moved to another school, he would start thinking about himself, and that it would be better for him. And I hoped I'd become independent too, and stop relying on him. So I left, taking my feelings with me. Gradually we matured, growing stronger to be there for each other again. Linda and Bruce are important to each other. It's nice that she realizes that. Why did I start thinking about Brian again? Maybe I've liked him for a long time. I just don't want to admit it, Sarah thought to herself. Sarah, I know what you're thinking right now. Listen to your heart before you get close to Brian, Linda advised. But because I've known Brian for so long, he's been treating me like a little sister the whole time. What if he doesn't have romantic feelings for me? Sarah hesitated. What kind of guy would be jealous of his little sister? You've noticed, he's jealous of you even of me, Linda exclaimed. But he's never told me he likes me, has he? Sarah continued hesitantly. You know what I've noticed? Guys have a hard enough time admitting their feelings. They don't like to say it out loud. Linda reassured the girl. When Linda and Sarah went to pick up Brian the next day, it turned out that he had already left for school. Sarah was very upset by this, as it was the first time Brian had not waited for her, but had left on his own. Is this really his way of saying he doesn't want to hang out with me? Maybe he's really sad because I'm spending a lot of time with Linda? I really hope he doesn't hate me, thought Sarah as she watched Brian. Have you noticed that Brian has been really weird the last few days? Even take today. He hasn't rescheduled your drink, even though he usually does, prompted Glenn. Not lately, but for a long time now he's been acting strange. Can you believe 2 days ago when I brought him water, he suddenly stood up and touched my face with a strange look on his face, narrated Sarah. And then he tricked me into going to the warehouse with him. He locked me in and wouldn't let me come out while saying weird things. To be honest, I don't understand him at all lately. What was he thinking when he acted so assertively? What was that sudden rush of feeling? Couldn't he have acted more cautiously? Glenn thought to himself. Tell me what happened, asked Glenn to his buddy after class. I don't know what you're talking about now, replied Brian to him. Stop playing hard to get. Sarah told me everything. Explain to me what's gotten into you, asked Glenn. She told you everything? A blushing Brian interjected. Your behavior is extremely discouraging, Sarah. Did you really think I wouldn't notice how puzzled she was? Glenn resented. At least she's thinking about me, and that's a good thing, Brian said thoughtfully. It was obvious that he was upset and frustrated about something. Brian, you haven't been yourself lately. Explain to me what's the rush. I thought you were waiting until after high school to ask her out. Why did you change your mind? Glenn put his hand on his friend's shoulder. You know about the national math tournament the university holds every year? It's for sophomores only. The top student in the province gets a free place at the university. Brian began to explain. Mr. Shepard recommended that I spend a year in a preparatory class in the capital and then try out for the math tournament. You do realize I can't pass up an opportunity like that, right? I'm afraid that while I'm studying, Sarah will have someone else. When we were still little, I had to go out of town for a couple months, so during that time she found another friend. What happens if I go away for a whole year? You see, she's special to me, and I know she shines brightly, like a star. That's why people can't help but reach out to her. Well then, why don't you tell her that straight out? Why don't you tell her how you feel and what you're going through? Glenn asked. I can't. I'm not sure she likes me either, replied Brian. Would you mind if I made a move and stole her from you? With a slight smile on his face, Glenn inquired. Of everyone who has any chance at all, yours is the closest to zero. His buddy answered him. Sometimes you're a real pain in the ass, smirking, Glenn said. Okay, you're on. I'll watch Sarah while you study. Glenn promised and patted his buddy on the back. Hi, Brian. What a meeting. Sarah patted the guy walking ahead of her on the back. The girl was firmly convinced that her buddy Brian was in front of her. Sarah, what did you want? Did something happen to you? The guy wondered. When he turned around, the girl realized it wasn't Brian, but a classmate who looked a lot like him. Sorry, I thought you were the one I still had. From the back, you look a lot alike, the girl admitted. She has nothing to say to you. Stay out of it. Brian asked his classmate and put his hand on Sarah's shoulder. Don't you have anything to say to me? Asked Brian to Sarah. The girl had a lot of things she wanted to say but couldn't find the words. She was very nervous and tried not to look Brian in the eye. There's actually a lot of things I want to tell you. I thought that when I got close to Linda, you started to worry that I had forgotten about you. But I haven't. I want to remind you that Linda is not only my friend, but she's your friend, too." In a quiet voice, the girl said, "We've been together since we were kids, so you don't have to worry about our friendship." "Sarah, what a dumbass you are after all," Brian muttered in a doomed voice. "Can't you say something nice for once? I've never been as angry as I was this morning when you left for school without saying a word to me," grumbled Sarah. "Come on, you were so upset that you mistook another guy for me," resented Brian. "You look a lot alike from the back." Started to make excuses for Sarah. "You tell me not to make things up, but you're the one hanging out with other guys," said Brian in a displeased tone. "If I told you that I'm genuinely sorry for confusing you with someone else, would you be satisfied? I'm truly ashamed of it." Without looking at Brian, said Sarah, "Okay, bygones. I don't want to tease you anymore. I'll see you tomorrow morning," said Brian to the girl and went back to class. "Attention! Next week the district leaders will be visiting our school, so each class should prepare something for them. We got a passage from French literature. Everyone should participate," the math teacher announced. Someone in the class shouted loudly that Sarah was perfect for the role of the main character. The girl protested fearfully. "I think Sarah will be the main character, too. I hope she doesn't have anything against it," said the math teacher, noticing the girl's frightened look. "Of course I don't mind," mumbled Sarah. She couldn't refuse the teacher. She already had a strained relationship with him because of her low grades in math. "I want in, too," Brian said in a loud voice. "What's the matter with him?" Brian never participated in school activities. "It's probably all because of Sarah. I told you there's obviously something between them," the classmates whispered. "I remember he never liked to participate in school activities. Said they pissed him off. What is this change in his character again?" Sarah thought in surprise. "Who else wants to participate in our little play?" the math teacher asked. "I will." Glenn raised his hand as well. "I want to, too," Linda exclaimed. "What nonsense. She's not a fan of events like this. Does she really want to participate because of Brian? We have to act. We can't just sit back," Bruce thought to himself. The guy asked to be signed up as well. "Great. Just enough of you for the lead roles. We have a scene from the second half of a novel by a famous French writer. Now we need actors for the minor roles. They will play the extras and the revolutionaries," the teacher announced. Bruce was annoyed at the fact that they had chosen the simpleton Sarah for the lead role. He thought Linda was much prettier, so more suited for the role. Why do people call her pretty? She doesn't have a tenth of Linda's beauty in her. What's so special about her? Thought Bruce, looking at Sarah. "You're sitting in my seat right now. Move over," Brian asked Bruce in a disgruntled tone. "It's that scumbag again. I'm so sick of him," Bruce thought irritably. "And I like the role I've been given. I feel confident in it," Linda confessed to Sarah on the way home. "Linda, why haven't you been in touch with us? We miss you," Helga exclaimed. "You know there's an English speech contest coming up, right? What do you think about giving me your place? Your family is rich enough as it is. You don't need a penny cash prize, right?" Helga squeezed Linda's hands tightly. This whole conversation was heard by Bruce. Such remarks towards Linda really annoyed him. "This will be a huge opportunity for me. This money will be of great use to me. So do you agree?" Helga continued to say. Bruce wanted to intervene, but suddenly he heard her new friend Sarah standing up for the girl. "Linda always wins first place in the English speech contest because she knows the subject well. Why should she give you her prize? And how can you talk about friendship if you act like this? If you never cared for Linda, you have no right to trouble her with declarations of friendship. Who do you think you are? And have you ever asked Linda if she wants to be friends with you? Has she even once called you a friend?" "Linda, answer me. Are we friends?" Helga asked. "Girls, I don't want to be friends with you," replied Linda. And yet Linda has changed. Her character has gotten a lot firmer, Bruce thought to himself. Closing herself off from prying eyes with her books, Sarah continued writing her story. "And you're not so bad. Thanks for sticking up for Linda. Here, I bought this drink for you." Bruce walked over to the girl and handed her a tin can of the drink. Thanks, but no thanks, Sarah said fearfully. Why are you reacting like that? Am I really that scary? Bruce asked the girl. No, it's fine, exclaimed Sarah. So go ahead and get that drink, said Bruce in an angry tone. Brian walked into the classroom. Sarah noted to herself that he looked very good today. Bruce noticed the enthusiastic look Sarah gave Brian. Sarah, do you like Brian? Bruce asked unexpectedly. Why would you bring that up all of a sudden? A confused Sarah rose from her seat. It seemed like the girl was ready to run out of the classroom at any moment. You don't have to answer that. I can tell from your reaction that you like him, but I wouldn't advise you to date him. Don't think he's a nice guy since he cares about you. What if it's not just you he's acting this way with? Have you never thought about that? But that's my personal opinion. You don't have to listen to it. I just feel like warning you. And what's so bad about him? Or have you and him already had a falling out? What has he done to you? Sarah got angry. I just have some pictures. I'll show them to you now, said Bruce and pulled out his phone. The pictures showed Brian talking to Linda about something. It was obvious that he was embarrassed about something. What a fool you are. Do you really think I'm going to react to those pictures in any way? What's weird about Brian talking to his girlfriend? Yeah, they could be talking about some pretty sensitive topics. There's nothing wrong with that, Sarah said in a nonchalant voice. Okay, take it easy on yourself. By the way, I want to tell you that I can't stand to have someone hanging around Linda all the time. Bruce warned the girl. I see you two are getting along pretty well, said Brian as he walked over. Brian, how long have you been standing here? Sarah asked fearfully. Since you asked me what I was so bad at, whispered Brian in the girl's ear. If you have time to talk nonsense, you'd better spend it practicing. Mr. Shepard asked me to tell you that the performance has been rescheduled for the day after tomorrow, warned Bruce Brian. Do you really think I can't memorize a few stupid lines? Bruce hissed angrily. Just try to embarrass us, and I don't know what I'll do to you, warned Brian. You watch yourself. I can handle my part. Bruce answered him. Sarah thought with despair at the fact that the show was a couple days away, and the guys were acting like little kids. If this kept up, their performance was going to fail miserably.